This guy. Do-do-do. Channel. And where's my mute button? Where's my mute button?
Yeah, it won't give it to you until you're online.
There. Alright. Let me push the button. Here.
Yeah, you should probably just reload the page. You'll be online. Online.
No, I have to do it before we did. Don't worry. Okay.
Nope, that's good.
We're here! Alright! Hey everybody, welcome to the WMGSO Twitch channel. I'm your host, Sham Watermelon Farm. Today, we are streaming Star Fox 64 and our arrangement of Pillars of Aquas with our guest Chris. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, what's up?
Give me just a second to mute this guy. Star Fox 64. There we go. Alright. Okay, so we're gonna jump right in with our special guest player, Joe, because I am awful at this game, so I will spare you any constantly dying and not getting past the first stage. So let's jump in. We will probably get to Aquas maybe midway through the stream, but we're gonna start with Corneria. So
I don't think we're making it to
We'll see. We'll see. It's possible.
We will see. So there is a lot to say about Star Fox, and one thing that actually kind of jumped out at me when we were sort of thinking of things to talk about was, as popular as this game is and as beloved as it is, it's not often something you see in the game concert circuit kind of thing. You know, most professional orchestras that do game music, or, you know, kind of like the top 10 game music lists that you see through like game sites, usually don't include Star Fox. And it's something that I think is kind of overlooked. What do you think, Chris?
Yes and no. It really doesn't get any love at all, which is less love than it deserves. But at the same time, a lot of the songs, especially from the earliest Star Foxes, don't orchestrate that well. I have seen performances of like the main theme from the first Star Fox. This is the second Star Fox. But I imagine that people would get kind of tired of doing just the one song.
Sure.
And there's a lot of like more electronic, techno-ish music in the first game. So, what's curious though is that this particular game doesn't get any love at all. When there is at least a couple things that would orchestrate well. So
do you think the original games they are 8-bit, they are, you know, older, they don't orchestrate as well because of their more like spaciness, or they're maybe not as strong a melody as maybe something like Mario or Zelda?
I think that I think it's mostly the genre that they chose. So, you know, it's like very regular electronic beat. There are some like space kind of sounding instruments.
Sure.
But you know, it's hard to translate rock or techno or electronic to orchestra. Like, it becomes kind of boring after a while.
Gotcha.
Having the drummer, you know, the live percussionist just doing an 8-beat boom, boom.
That's true.
Like, it's kind of campy, so, you know.
It's one thing to have that on, say, a drum machine, but quite another to have a live percussionist.
Right, and so I do see it a little more often at things like MagFest or you know, other cons, or on cover bands' albums where they do, you know, studio recording. They can fine tune the sound a little bit. So Star Fox is occasionally on there.
It's interesting you mentioned the rhythm, because I feel like of this soundtrack in particular, the instrument that stands out to me the most is the snare. It's just this really prominent driving snare drum, and like some scores will have like a really prominent bass line. Like when we did Chrono Trigger last week, we talked about that, how there's just this like is forefront, this, you know, rhythmic bass. But in Star Fox, you know, we're hearing some trumpets, some MIDI versions of trumpets, and there's some strings, but most recognizable for me is this like this very militaristic kind of snare. And so it's not a march. It's not as restrictive as that, but it is just its rhythm is what you can hear when you have this cacophonous shooting sounds and these, you know, robots walking around. That's what kind of cuts through. Do you think that there was a particular reason for that, or just because it's neat, or does it define the game in a way for you?
So it's actually not something I had noticed until you mentioned it, but it does stick out now that you do mention it. I think it's exciting. I think it can inject sort of a quick pace to the music, and up feeling to the music. Whether it was a deliberate choice, I'm not 100%. So these old games work on samples, which is why you get the MIDI trumpets. So it's the composers were tasked with both using samples and finding the samples they would use. So it's not like a Windows system where it comes with 127 pre-made instruments for you to use. They had to go and find every sound sample they wanted to put in a song. So a lot of them would just turn to the keyboards they already owned.
Sure.
And you'd load up your drum machine on your keyboard, and you have the one like really slappy drum because it was meant for drum and bass. It was meant for like the club. Yeah, so like, and there's no nuance to it, right? Like if you play it soft, it's 100%. If you play it really loud, it's 100%. So.
I will say this is not a nuanced score. Now that you mention it, there's some like I think the standout really is Aquas in that it is. This soundtrack is like an hour long, maybe a little more than that. It runs in a compression loop like all N64 games at the time did, but most of it is like what you're hearing now in this background of the kind of like very stately, evoking piloting and the brave dogfighting, go get those Jerry's lads kind of thing. But and Aquas is where we take a really divergent turn to. It is slower, and it's strange and eerie. It's not as uplifting. It's not joyful and triumphant. It's not about heralding the heroes shooting these asteroids as we are shooting them now. It's about exploration, and it's about plot, visibus plot, such as it is.
Right, plot, yeah.
So.
And it's about mystery. Like,
Yes.
Aquas is very dark, a lot like this level, in part because these are technical limitations of the time. They had to make these things at a maximum draw distance because otherwise the processor would get overwhelmed. So Aquas has this very dark, shadowy feel, and the distance is murky, but also because they kind of made this story up about how there was an ancient civilization that used to live there, and like it just vanished and no one knows why, and they never go into it. I guess because it wasn't all that important. But you're like kind of driving the submarine through the ruins of this civilization that's now flooded out, and so you do have this ethereal, eerie music that floats around in Aquas. I guess to try to reinforce that mysterious feeling.
Sure.
The other song I want to call out for not being like the rest is the Zones theme, which comes right after Aquas. That's a planet that's been poisoned by it's like a toxic waste dump,
Yes.
or like the bad guys have made it a toxic waste dump, and it used to be not horrible. But there's some sort of a tenderness to that music and like a sadness to it. Like, hey, this planet used to be great, and now it's not, and that almost goes between the strong thematic, dogfighting hero, and then back to the more tender, desperate, sad. So that's a lot of people's favorites as well.
Sure,
It's a good
sure.
song.
Yeah, I think earlier Star Fox games did not include that kind of contrast as much anyway. Like there wasn't, like we talked about, there are small elements of plot in this game. The earlier games were a little more just like straight fighting, straight excitement, straight pew-pew shooting.
Right.
This one injected a little depth, just a little more, just with the hardware expansion of what sounds that could be made with the N64. And started trying things that are a little different, a little... Woo! Nice.
Yeah, there's one game released before this, and
The unreleased Star Fox 2, of course. As well.
right, okay, that's very true. I was not thinking about that, but you're right. That did predate this in development. They put a lot of the ideas from Star Fox 2 into this
Yes.
game, but that first game, I think you're right. I think there was not a lot of contrast in the soundtrack. There are a couple moments that stick out for me. When you see Andros the first time and his like face comes together, there's this really like holy crap moment where there's no music at all. It's just this like really weird like like uncanny moment where this just thing comes out of the ether and becomes this horrible monster that you have to fight. And then
Especially the boss music.
yeah, and then you get the really intense like boss music. So that always struck me as really effective use of sound, or like actually like not use of sound.
Yes.
Because it's silent except for the engine on the ship.
Pew, pew, pew.
And then there's a couple. I think the Black Hole has this really weird like lilty kind of song to it. It's almost like a waltz. And it's because you're in just such this weird place. You like see all these like dead hulks of ships flying past you. It's hard to get to the Black Hole. It's kind of like a secret in the game.
Yes.
You see all these like dead hulks of ships flying past you. So it's this weird like. It's not a heroic song of any kind. I don't really know how to describe it, but it has this weird kind of like bounce to it.
Oh, you got this. You got this.
You can do it, man.
We're definitely not getting to the Black Hole.
That is okay.
Oh no, who's this jerk?
I'm not sure I've ever been to the Black Hole in this game, if there is one.
So every Star Fox game has a similar area.
I don't know.
Or- We'll have to find it.
Yeah.
Let's see what you've got.
This is an enemy from the first game. They reinvented him for this game.
Andros?
No, this particular, the rock
okay.
crusher. It looks way better in this game than it did in the first game, but it behaves just the same way.
It's interesting that the polygonal design of N64 games, I feel like suits this really well.
Yeah, it does.
Because you have the very angular designs of spaceship wings and of missiles, so it's like, you know what? It's a space game, and there are lots of pointy geometric shapes in space.
Yeah, it was an aesthetic adopted by the first one, kind of out of necessity.
Right.
Because I mean, like the poly count that thing could handle was like 100 triangles,
Yes.
right? Like, I mean, if you put as much detail into any one thing, even one of these models would probably overwhelm the Super Nintendo. And so, you know, like the R-Wing in the Super Nintendo had like, I don't know, 20 triangles in it. It was like very, very basic. So by necessity, if they wanted to make a 3D rail shooter, they had to go with this geometric, you know, harsh angles, low poly count look. I think it just stuck with the series, which is fine, you know.
Yeah. That's all right. Look out for. That looks exactly like Sonya's energy things from Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah, man. Her little energy rings.
Oh no! Come on.
Acclaim, man.
You got it.
You know you can get Turok on Steam now?
Really?
Yeah, you can get Turok on Steam.
Excellent.
Sorry to jet, but I'm in a hurry.
Sorry to jet. I'm gonna.
I'll give you some space.
All right, mission 2 complete. Slippy and his dead eyes.
Yeah, that would be because I shot you a bunch. That's my bad.
Oh my goodness.
To have a friend like you.
So, are we getting to Aquas anytime soon, or do you want to just maybe? Okay,
We
all right, that's
we
fine.
are on the wrong track.
Okay.
But that's okay. There's some really cool stuff.
No, that's
to this
fine.
track.
I just we could jump into talking about the arrangement if you like.
Yeah,
We could
sure.
Look at the shiny thing.
This one has the cool like Spanish trumpet.
Oh,
It's the Star Wolf theme.
Neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is Star Wolf. Oh god.
They didn't really. They didn't. So like. You know what's funny? You asked me earlier why they didn't orchestrate a lot of Star Fox music, and now I'm remembering that there's a GameCube game called Star Fox Assault, which they were like, we don't want to deal with Star Fox. Namco, make us a game. So Namco made them this game, right? But they orchestrated live all the music from this game, yeah. And it's very hard to find the soundtrack. I've never found a complete copy.
Interesting.
But they turned this cool Star Wolf song into like this almost flamenco-ish, like it's really great.
That's so
Oop,
cool.
he did.
Oh, you fiend. He was your comrade.
He was your dad's best friend.
He watched your dad die.
Probably true.
So I guess we could maybe jump into talking a little more about the arrangement. I guess
Sure.
start by why Aquas? If this is a game that is overlooked, and if this is a game that is very dear to you and your gaming growing up, what was your inspiration?
So that's a good question. So I guess I just played it a lot, so all the songs are stuck in my head permanently. But this is an idea I've had for a while, like much longer than I've been working on it, and I kind of held off because we didn't have all the pieces in place. We didn't have a harp, which is absolutely necessary, and I didn't feel like we had the choir that was good enough to do it until WMGSO really got started.
Sure.
And also the other side of it was we didn't have a choir that was big enough with enough women, because it's really the women carry the melody throughout most of it.
Gotcha.
So we need a strong soprano presence, a strong alto presence.
So from the start, you envisioned it as a harp playing the main.
Has to be.
Yeah. As opposed to like a piano or.
Yeah, that little ostinato had to be a harp. It just, because it's like that Greco-Roman meme where Neptune, yes, harps, it's Poseidon under the ocean, has to be a harp.
Gotcha.
Goes back to Greek,
That's true, yeah.
Greek times.
That shorthand for underwater has been a harp since the start of Western civilization.
Exactly. And Holst does it in Neptune, and
Yep.
that's kind of like that's the legitimacy I was looking for, a lot of
Holst
these.
being the composer of the Planet Suite, which has a theme for the 9 planets, and Neptune being very mysterious underwater, and where a lot of adventure music is codified for what we use today.
It's true. It's very true. We could spend a lot of time talking about that, but I don't want to get too far off topic for your question. There's a lot of music in this game that I like. And I guess I wanted something more expressive for the choir to sing. I guess is what it boils down to. I feel like Zone S would be awesome, Cornelia would be awesome,
Yes.
a couple of the other songs would be awesome, but we have stuff in the repertoire that sounds like it already. And there would be a chance to really, I guess, improve my own ability, because an Aquas arrangement was not straight transcription.
Sure.
There was a lot of creative redesign in there, and I wanted something to test my abilities in that regard, because I've been doing a lot of straight transcription lately, which is awesome and fast, but doesn't help me improve.
So it was a personal exploration for you as much as it was wanting to do something from Starbucks.
Yep, and I think, so I really thought of this 6 or 7 years ago, when thinking what new music can the choir do? And I was, I said, there's a lot in this arrangement that isn't in this arrangement. It isn't in the song, right?
Yeah.
Once I imagined the melody in 4-part harmony for the choir, I was then there's a lot of chord work I've just created. Now the orchestra has to match, otherwise it won't make any sense.
Gotcha.
So it was a chance for me to say, hey guys, even those of you who have heard this before, you probably never thought of this.
Sure, yeah.
So, and that's what a lot of that. I think that's what GSO is about. Hey, I bet no matter what you have heard of game music, I bet you've never thought of this, or I bet you never
Definitely.
heard this. So.
Yeah, I think more than some of our other arrangements, Star Fox is when you place it next to the original, it's pretty far removed, which is a great thing. And it's it gives us more to give as musicians, because I think you could probably take Star Fox as it appears in this game with maybe 4 musicians.
Yeah.
But having it be played by 80 is very different indeed. You got 3 of Star Wolf's crew chasing you. Reyno's on it. He's got your back, Joe.
Yeah. Well, Joe's outnumbered because he killed Peppy.
Pigma.
Uh-oh.
Man, you gonna take that? You gonna take that?
No, don't fly into the bomb, Joe.
Did not kick him out.
It looks like volume fog does not work on this emulator.
Womp.
It's fine.
It's fine. We're fine.
It's fine.
I
We're
didn't
fine.
need that bass, right?
No.
So you started with the choir and then built the orchestra around. There.
Sort of in my head, yeah. I'd never put
Gotcha.
pen to paper, but I was like,
Sure.
you know, like I want them to do the big part of the song, you know. It's like,
All aircraft report.
I want the choir to do that because the choir doesn't even do that in the original. But whatever MIDI instrument it kind of is, I'm not sure. So it's sort of like a choir a little bit.
It sounds a little like a ooh or a
Yeah.
something.
But I was like, okay, I want the choir to do that because that's also kind of a Neptune Holst trope, you know,
Definitely.
like underwater has harp, but it also has choir, right? And so Holst specifically has off-stage choir, so
Yes.
he's supposed to be a women's choir in the back with an open door to backstage. But I was like trying to make that work really hard. I'm like, no, it's stupid. So I was like,
I think at one performance of the Planets I saw, it was they were not just backstage, but outside of the theater,
Oh,
like
that's
in the
cool.
hallway.
That's cool.
And that was really neat.
and it like surrounds you kind of.
That probably would not have been very practical for us.
No. And they are very much background music in Neptune. In
Yes.
Aquas, the choir has the main feature most of the piece. So having them off stage didn't make a lot of sense. Wow, Joe, you are in trouble, man.
Oh, I'm well aware.
You got this.
So I wanted to give that to the choir because I felt it matched that trope really well. It would be something fun for the choir to do. And the piece wouldn't be, you know, like Dragonborn. It wouldn't be big and up and huge. It would be a new texture, a new mode for the choir to be in.
Yeah, it's interesting having like what often shows up in games as a kind of an accent, like the ooh ah sort of shimmery sound be the forefront, be like the melody, as opposed to just kind of like just exist and float in the background while the trumpets take care of it, you know, or while the strings take care of it or something.
Right, and I think we've talked about this before, but in a game you can get away with that
Yes.
because your attention is divided, and so long as the music complements what you're seeing and doing, that's fine. You know, it does not have to be a concert complete piece. It only needs to fit the situation.
Exactly.
But when you bring it to the stage, now suddenly you can't have something backgroundy for 3 minutes. The audience falls asleep.
Yeah. Oh, there he goes.
And you're not really saying anything, right?
Sure.
So,
Slippy has something to say.
yeah.
Out that weapon, boys.
So, yeah, I guess, do you want me to talk a little bit about what changes I made?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So, I already mentioned that I took the melody from whatever kind of MIDI instrument it was and gave it to the choir. The choir has 4-part, 5-part, or even 7-part harmony for most of the piece, and they, carry the melody for most of the piece. But the original is very thinly instrumented. There's the harp ostinato, which I've kept, that goes throughout almost the entire piece. And there's like some really ancillary drums, like every bar line you
Hear
get
a snare like
or a bass drum just going doom every bar line or two. And then you've got these kind of ethereal fake MIDI voices.
some twinkles.
Yeah, just carrying the melody, right? So you've got like sorry. You got these parallel fifths. And that's, it goes like that for the whole piece. You occasionally get some strings that pop in as kind of background towards the, the big climax at the end. But that's it. It's super thin. And so I wanted something that would just pushing that like Greco-Roman aesthetic to the maximum. I wanted to like have something that kind of talked about this civilization that left these pillars behind. The only thing you see are these like Greco-Roman columns in the level that like suggest there was some kind of civilization there.
Yes.
So I wanted to get some kind of big like, I don't know, Mahler-esque or Holst-esque orchestration that referred to the grandeur of this civilization and the aesthetic of their art.
Yeah, well, I will say, it's interesting you mentioned wanting to feel big because when comparing the two, the original feels actually quite small and like empty. And I mean, part technical limitations, but it's just sort of like the feeling that you're the only person in this very dead place. But in the arrangement, it's grandeur, splendor. It's very like it feels more open, I suppose.
What I think you just said hits on something very important. In the game, it's very important, and you feel like you're the only person in this empty, dead place. In part because you are, but in part because that's kind of the tack they took with the level. It's dark, it's mysterious, you don't know a lot about it. Creatures are coming up from the dark to like eat your submarine, and they're surprising you, so you're on edge. In the arrangement, I almost wanted to go 90 degrees to that, so I started with very thin arrangement, a couple strings, couple of woodwinds to give you that murky, alone feeling.
Yes.
But then I wanted to explore that civilization, because the game never does. The game makes brief mention of it, if anything. I wanted to explore that, the grandeur, the sense of loss, that like, oh, they're all dead because the planet flooded or whatever. And what were they? And are there more to them than just these pillars? Is there some city off screen somewhere that just like the instrumentation, is there more architecture, more complexity?
And that's reflected in the lyrics as well. Like there's a lot of questions that are being asked but not really answered. Wait.
Yes.
You made it!
And Zaynep, who's been on your stream before, was instrumental to me in writing the lyrics. She has a friend who's fluent in Latin, and so Zaynep designed the lyrics in English, and they worked together to translate it. But a lot of these are unanswered questions. Where are these people? Will they come back? Did they perish?
So for all you Latin speakers out there, this arrangement has some interesting Easter eggs in the lyrics. Go. Too fast.
You can make it. Nope, you're dead.
Well, you got the checkpoint, so that's good.
Yeah, keep accidentally hitting the up C button, which
Boost. Yeah. Oh, okay,
boosts the
gotcha.
cockpit, which is useless.
When you get that fork, go right. It's easier. There's less like stuff flipping at you. Yeah.
I think the percussion that you did choose is also less in your face. They put in some bells, and there's some timpani rolls, but it's not like where in the original there's a ball going the whole time. So.
Yeah. I think that. So in the mid '90s, game composers would make liberal use of the kick drum because the MIDI kick drum was very small, and it didn't have like a thunderous reverb decay of like a minute and a half, and you could do it over and over and over again. It would just add a very gentle accent to the music. A real kick drum is like a thunderclap going off. So that
cannot quite transcribe that.
Yeah, that just does not translate at all, and that's okay. The Aquas is really about these kind of smooth melodies that weave around. They don't really need to be punctuated that much. I really I'll do a cymbal roll for accent, or to accent maybe, at its biggest part, I'll do some timpani to kind of accent the notes, the melody. But yeah, it's more about it's more about being like an ocean. I mean, even the arrangement of the original comes in waves.
Right,
There's 3 or 4 bars of music, and then sort of a trough, and then it crests into 3 or 4 more bars, and I try to keep that going on as much as practical in the arrangement. So it's really about being smooth percussion for accent. It doesn't need the snare drum rolls.
Space, so dark.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Who's this beast?
So this is the secret weapon.
The secret weapon. Thanks, Fox.
Destroy.
Alright, can you do it first try?
I don't actually remember how to.
Oh, he
Shoot him in the eyes.
Sure. Oh, smack. Oh. This is stressful.
Nope.
You are an enemy.
Thanks, buddy.
Oh, I didn't know. Star Fox is a warrior for peace.
Yeah. Actually, he's literally a mercenary.
Never mind.
Yep. Yeah, I want an alternate universe Star Fox where Andros hires him to help him take over the galaxy.
Read my Star Fox fanfiction.
Yeah.
Star Fox 64 AU.
I also want an alternate universe Mirror's Edge where like Faith is a rich kid and like
She just
like her
hates
family's
everybody.
really well off and yeah, and she's just like emo the whole time. And she like does all this parkour stuff and they're like, "Oh my god, you're going to kill yourself."
Whatever.
But also where like the world isn't all as sad as it actually is and she's just like saying it is because she's a teenager.
Nice.
Nope.
Never mind. Oh.
That
You didn't say the magic word.
destroy.
You got it. No, probably not. I have faith. I got faith. Look at all this faith that I have in you.
Yeah, Slippy. Okay.
Don't shoot Slippy.
Smush!
Goodbye.
Hey, you get to play the one we were talking about where a giant plant eats him later. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
How many designers do you think went into that spacecraft to make it wag a finger?
That's a great question.
That seems very impractical.
Game teams are much larger now than they used to be. I'm gonna guess 3 or 4 people worked on that model, like a modeler, a texture, an animator.
But
Well, okay. That's good.
oh, that's just insult to injury.
Well,
Try again.
Ah!
I got me first then.
Wow.
Real monsters.
Man.
By virtue of
I love
being
that
the
show.
only person to ever play this particular copy of the game.
Alright, let's try from the beginning.
Let's see if there's a way for us to.
Save state? That's okay.
There's no.
Got a second controller, we could do multiplayer.
That's true.
I'm doing
I'm
my
kidding, I'm
controller.
kidding.
Oh, wait, I don't think it'll plug into the pie though.
Yeah.
KT.
It's tough to see.
I'll do my best.
I'll do my best.
The first Star Fox is the first game that I'm aware of that had actual like audio voiceover.
Nice.
I think there were a couple NES games that had like a clip or two
Sure.
of voiceover, but like the
Are we not counting Sega?
yeah, exactly. But like actual in-game dialogue, like
Sure.
Star Fox was the first game that had that, and I think that's part of the reason why they went a complete suite of in-game, in-flight dialogue here, because a lot of N64 games won't. They'll do a couple of lines and then just read the text for the rest. But
Like all of Banjo-Kazooie.
yeah. Yeah, or like Ocarina of Time, where she goes Link, and then
Hey!
6 paragraphs of reading. But back in the day when the first like voiceover came on, everyone was like, "Oh man, it's just like a movie!"
Look how much we've grown.
Yeah, exactly. They'll never make a game better than this.
No, we literally have nothing but talking sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Somebody told me that Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning has 500,000 lines of spoken dialogue. Yeah.
Golly.
I work with a lot of people who used to work on Reckoning.
Gotcha.
So they were talking about the production of it, and
That's nuts.
I mean, yeah, the producer said he was in the voiceover studio for like 3 months getting all of this dialogue.
Use the booster tank.
Pew, 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 pew.
I guess I should be thankful.
Nice.
Do a barrel roll.
Practice makes perfect. I
Right
guess.
on.
See, now you're expecting them.
I've played this level a lot.
Right, and that's how you get good at this game, is you
Fair
memorize
enough.
this game.
Yeah.
Because it is. No, well, okay.
Joe,
And again,
you ruined it. It's okay. If I were playing this, I probably would have crashed. Like,
right, I have
immediately.
to,
would have just been like, what? You don't do this on the ground?
Falco must have bit the dust. Bit the
I
dust.
think it was also that you had to make it through those. You had to go through all of the little.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
He goes, hey, you're pretty good there.
You don't suck. I guess I'll tell you about this other boss I found.
This is Starlock. I'm going to crush you.
Oh yeah, also if you lose Slippy, you never get the boss health bar.
Really?
Because that's his thing, like he
Oh,
figures
he
out the boss,
analyzes
yeah,
it.
figures out the boss
Got
health bar for you. So without him, you just have to guess. Ah, that was nice.
Oh, it's black.
I failed you.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I said, this level I've played a bunch.
Do you want to try going to the other path and see if we can get to...
You don't get a choice.
Oh, it
Yeah.
just does it. Okay.
It's whether or not you did the game. So if I'd done all of the weaving back and forth correctly, then I would have gone on the
Okay.
right path. But now I'm on the second path.
I don't know if we can hear you on the stream.
You can, I mean, you can
Take a check of it.
retry, but you'll lose your double blaster
Yeah.
and a life.
Yeah, that's fine.
Honestly, losing the double blaster is way worse than dying.
Right.
Like, that's the worst part of dying, is losing the gun.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of
I
a...
cheat our way there and like save state our way there.
Nah, no big deal. I was trying to think of a genre that Fox, the series, kind of fell into. Like, would you call this straight up game music, or would you call it like kind of spacey 8-bit sort of?
So, game music is a genre, and it absolutely is not a genre. Like, if that makes any sense.
No,
like,
I know what you mean. It's a category
yeah,
that defies categories.
But it is also a genre in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but not in most ways. I don't really know how to qualify that any better.
No, that's
But it
fine.
does seem, it has like kind of certain similarities, even in songs that are of different genres. Like,
Sure.
But anyway, so yeah, this is more orchestral than the Super Nintendo Star Fox.
It's quiet.
I'd say this game's mainly orchestral, but of course it uses the MIDI instruments, so it doesn't sound like a movie score.
Right, and that's something that interests me greatly, is that Koji Kondo, as a composer, like, there's most of stuff that is written about him and things that he said have to do with Mario and Zelda, and very little about Star Fox. And it's almost like when you invent a genre, you know, like, most of what is analyzed critically about your work is, the thing that defined it, not necessarily the thing that you kind of did in your own time because you enjoyed a movie or a show in the 60s called Thunderbirds.
Right,
You wanted
right.
to design it like that, so.
And I don't know how much influence he had on this soundtrack. I don't know if he was the main composer or if he was brought in as like extra help.
He did like a couple of specific tracks, like Accordia he did. I don't think he did Aquas. But he's co-credited with a couple other composers as well, and I think he just like contributed specific tracks.
Yeah, that's they used to do that back in the day. Like they just be like, oh,
You wanna do that bit?
we're behind schedule. Yeah, like we
Bring
need more.
another guy.
Yeah, we need more music.
So I don't know, it's just something about Fox being less melodic, maybe? Like, it is more, I feel like more than something like Mario or Zelda, it fades in the background a bit more. I don't know if it's just more noise or just more going on, or maybe just more of a focus goal, because like you are, at least in this game, you are, you're on a rail. You're just pushing, you're moving your ship side to side, up and down, and moving the cursor around, but you're not exploring. You're not jumping, not looking for secrets. You're not playing an ocarina and going back in time. So
Right. So this game, you're like up almost all the time. There's no like, there's no peaceful exploration.
Sure.
And it's much more intense action than like Mario, which is okay, gonna run, gonna jump.
yeah,
It's like kill an enemy, 4 or 5 times a minute. This one's like 4 or 5 times a second.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, there's less chance to breathe in this game
Yeah.
than in other of Koji Kondo's compositions.
So, I don't know. It's almost hard for me to answer that question because I grew up playing this and like my brain is compartmentalized. Like, I can now enjoy the music and play this game simultaneously because I know this game so well.
Yeah.
But it probably did take me quite a while to like really get a hold of the music when I played it in the beginning, just because I was focusing on not dying, you know.
Sure.
So
that's another thing. It's like it is difficult. So, like, I can't back up and get my shit back in order and then try again. You're
right.
Nope.
Yep. You got to keep going forward. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that for the most part, the music's kind of like. It's like you don't know it's there, except if it weren't there, you'd miss it.
That's true.
So
it wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, and then it kind of comes forward in the rare down moments where they're like, they're trying to reset the screen. If they want to throw all these asteroids at you, they actually do have to clear the screen because the game can't keep up with it.
Right.
But
there needs to be
also,
a space so it renders.
But also, like, it's helpful to give the player a chance to breathe, reset, and face a new challenge. It creates a better cadence than just like constant mortal peril.
So you're right. There is like here waiting for the boss to show up.
Right. And so everyone knows this part of the song.
Yes.
Because there's nothing to do but listen to it.
Right, and wait for him to appear.
But so eventually through the down moments, I learned the song and was able to piece it together. And now I can hum along and play the game at the same time.
Yeah, that's something that Kondo has said, that the main theme that you hear at the title screen has to be the most catchiest, most important piece because the player is going to be hearing it a lot.
That's true.
And absolutely that was the case in earlier games where you had started over so often. And I think like less so now for more modern games and like longer RPGs, like, I didn't hear the title theme of Fallout nearly as much as I would have if I had to constantly go to the beginning every time I died. So.
Yeah, that's true. It's an interesting point. I think that Star Fox's title screen is representative in a lot of ways. It's kind of a and it's a kind of a riff on the main theme. I'm sorry, I'm terrible.
That's right. The main theme in 64 is kind of like a remix of that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of like.
Yeah. So it's not iconic actually
Sure.
in my view. That's almost like business as usual. Like, all right, the hard part's over. Now we're gonna go back to the ship and fix the planes and eat munch and whatever, and like that's more of a like back to normal kind of theme for me. The old Star Fox theme.
I know that you. I admit defeat.
That one's way more iconic in my opinion.
It's much catchier.
Yeah, and it's more up. It's
It's
like
simpler.
we're the heroes, we won. 64 theme is more like let's take a shower. That was difficult.
ZD Major, you were promised Aquas. Unfortunately, this game is very hard. So we'll do our best to get to Aquas. We had a chat about it a little while ago, but no. So Chris broke down the melody. So
Break it down.
break it down. I guess we could pretend we're in Aquas. Like, oh yes, look at this mysterious place.
Water. All the water.
Water's everywhere. This civilization is full of rocks.
I'm reminded of another kind of heroic theme from the first Star Fox game. it actually kind of breaks with what I told you earlier, where it's more techno-inspired and like space agey and like not orchestral. There's the Space Armada theme is actually very melodic, very orchestral, and very fun. In fact, I've heard orchestral remix of it in like Smash Brawl. And, like, other stuff,
that's true.
It's like
There is a place where it shows up as a remix of itself. Yeah, those are a lot of we talked about this a little in Overwatch, but there's some shorthands for heroic themes in that, absolutely. And I almost feel like in that sense, it's the kind of the to. There's something about that for me evokes, oh, this is a fighter.
Right.
This is a someone who's strong and who's what's another word for heroic?
heroic,
So-
iconic, legendary.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. So it's and you hear that throughout the soundtrack as well. Like you hear the boom, 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 boom. So that kind of percussiveness,
Yeah, for sure.
as
for sure.
opposed to, well, I guess in this era it was hard to get something that was like, that's a French horn, and those kind of heavy horn things make me think of heroes. Like, so to work around that heroic shorthand that you hear in, say, a traditional like British march or something like that, I think that the rhythm was something that was relied on a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the composers were like trying to go that route. And while I don't feel like they were completely held back by the instrumentation, I think they were a little bit. And I think it's evidenced by Star Fox Assault, where they just took all these songs and just had a live orchestra play them, and it worked marvelously. So this is more like maybe the first Star Fox is more like Thunderbirds, but this is definitely more like, a bigger sci-fi movie.
That's true. It is going for more sci-fi.
Yeah.
Because you are in space. So I guess that.
I don't think it
Fair.
maybe takes itself quite as seriously as like Star Wars or something.
Yeah.
So it's a little more like space opera-y than even Star Wars was supposed to be. I feel like Star Wars was like supposed to be B-movie, and then everyone took it really seriously, and so now it's taking itself seriously.
You want a piece of me?
I'm trying to think, like, will Star Fox ever see a gritty 90s reboot?
I don't think it would work. 'Cause you have to like animals, right? And so
Yeah, it's talking
Okay.
animals and spaceships.
and
How
okay.
serious can it be?
All right, so to be fair, there are many, there are some communities out there that really celebrate like stories of all kinds with anthropomorphic characters, and that's cool. I don't know how mainstream reception of that
Sure,
would work. I don't know if everyone would be able to take it as seriously.
Well, I mean, not to compare Watership Down to Star Fox.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that absolutely can be told.
But I think also, I think part of Star Fox's identity is that it was born out of this kind of like silly thing. Like the Thunderbirds were puppets, they were like literally puppets.
It's like, this is for children. They're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
all cool spaceships and going on
It's
adventures.
like modern British kabuki. Like,
Modern British kabuki.
See what you've got.
The term is bunraku for the puppets.
oh, sorry.
okay.
What's kabuki?
Kabuki is the live performers with the elaborate.
Oh,
face
shoot.
painting.
All right. Well, at least you knew what I meant.
I'm just trying to think British kabuki now. That's I'm just absolutely tickled. Soundtrack of the first game makes me wish we had a low string section of 30 violas and cellos. Oh goodness.
Yes. A lot of things make me wish that, actually. Yep.
But would that be something that you would include in another Star Fox arrangement? Is lots of strings, or would you maybe go for like this is evoking horns and some? Which I guess you can hear kind of lower sounds itself.
If I were gonna do another one, I would probably push for a multi-arranger Star Fox the Planet suite. But if I didn't get that, I would probably do Zoness, which does use strings. That's the one that kind of goes back between like tender, heroic, tender.
Yes.
So that one does have a lot of strings to it. More high strings though, because it's more like, oh lament, oh
Right,
lament.
right.
Okay, hero stuff, hero stuff, hero stuff. Oh lament.
Oh, lament.
Yeah.
I admit defeat.
There. Oh, good job, good job. You got the guy. Skin
Nope.
your teeth.
Nope.
Just kidding. I made that same mistake 45 minutes ago. Ha ha ha. You're not as stupid as you look. Well, you're ugly. So there. I guess, I mean, again, thinking back to Holt, Mars is, you know, one of the most famous pieces of that suite, and it has a lot of those strings. And
It
it's
does.
very military, very...
It does. So I don't. This is going to be very subjective, right? So this is just like my personal take. I don't hear as much Mars in this as I do in like Star Wars
absolutely,
or something like that. So I didn't even really hear Neptune in Aquas that much. I like kind of made that stretch. I was like kind of trying to almost glue these ideas together on purpose.
Pay money to arrange something which features the lyrics, ooh, lament. And yeah, I was actually, Walt Horner says this is more Jupiter, and I think I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. It is more Jupiter. We have lots of flurious string movement, and then
Oh, Peppy, you're not doing good, Peppy. That's all right. You're doing great. We're cheering you on, and we're gonna get through this. We're gonna save the universe.
You should gain some health at the score screen.
Is Adrian turning up the contrast on the TV?
Sure. So, one thing we unfortunately discovered about this game is that it is black on black on black on black on black, and it's hard to see. There we go.
So Joe and I were talking about this, and neither of us remembers it as being this like crappily dark. So we suspect that like CRTs would draw the game a little differently, so that it was a little easier to see. Because especially the space levels, it's just like complete and total blackness, and you can't see anything until it's right on top of you.
Oh, well, then there's also this level, which is not black.
Nope.
So, this is just because I suck.
We'll do our best.
You can see here the emulator not doing the volume fog on the terrain very well. Like, you see how the mountains are coming out of the fog, but the terrain isn't?
See, until you said fog, I thought that was just like, oh, it's snowy.
No, there's supposed to be that kind of like beige fog on the ground plane, but it's not being drawn for some reason. That's why you'll see more
that's
ground
funny.
plane pop into existence.
Got it.
The fog's supposed to hide that.
Hey, it was mine!
We're flying awfully low to the ground.
It's okay. Roads are supposed to do that.
Yes. Yes, they are. Planetary fighters.
You're mine!
I don't remember.
You're not getting away that easy!
Maybe it's just
We've talked a lot about the music. We've talked a lot about how the music should complement the gameplay. We haven't talked much about the gameplay itself. And one of the iconic things about Star Fox is its gameplay.
Yes.
Joe, I know you haven't played it in a while, but I hope you'll agree when you say that the controls are quickly intuitive and you feel like you can do most of what you want to do right away. And it's stupidly fun just to blast aliens out of the sky.
Definitely.
There aren't a lot of super accurate physics in the game, but that just makes it more simple and easy to understand.
Right. This is not Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Right, exactly. It's not Battlestar Galactica where you can, end for end and you're flying backwards and stuff. So it's just like stupidly fun arcade action.
Interesting you mentioned arcade because I think you could really easily, like this came out for a home console, but there was a Star Fox arcade, I believe.
Was there? I didn't know that.
I could be making it up, but you're right. The style of gameplay is so well suited to short pick up, put down.
Yeah, and you kind of instant gratification, right? You know, push the button, blast a guy.
Yes.
Push the button again, blast another guy. You know, it's not like Zelda where like to really get into it, you need a couple hours. You know.
It's kind of thinking that Mario has expanded on. I'm sorry, Nintendo has expanded on with Mario, like, in making its game longer and more in depth and more like world building, as opposed to the very first game, which was similar gameplay approach, like pick up, you know what to do.
Right.
There's not much to it besides, you know, the jumping and the joy of running around and exploring, you know. But in you know, like your Super Mario Galaxies and your why not Super Mario Sunshine? It's more of like, oh, this is a much greater world that we're giving you the chance to explore, as opposed to just being solely about the gameplay itself.
I think that's a good point. I think that necessarily when you're going from 2D to 3D gameplay, you have to have more exploration. There's going to be more like standing around trying to orient yourself.
Yes.
You have a very tiny window into a very big world. And so sometimes you're just going to be like, hold on, I'm lost, I got turned around, I got to do this and that. But also you can, because you can look at things from multiple angles, you know, you're maybe not going to want, you know, in 2D Mario you run to the right, and that's what all you ever do. But in 3D Mario, hey, maybe there's a way I can sneak around this problem instead of, you know, running through it. Or, So I think by flipping that switch, going to 3D, it kind of necessitates exploration a little more.
And Kondo adjusted his composition style a little bit, not a ton. When actually he's talked about in Zelda, there is still very much the music is coded to be part of the gameplay and be location based, and to, you know, give you information about where you are based on like what area you're in, but also the changes themselves that he makes to give you information about the kind of gameplay that you are supposed to be engaging in. So like when you encounter an enemy, it changes a little bit. Like the different kinds of enemies will have slightly different background music as well.
Right.
And whereas with Super Mario Brothers, the music was intended to be very close to the actions you were performing in the moment, as opposed to where you decided to go as a player. So it's like there's still very much he wanted the music to be sequenced and to be tied to what the player was doing, to the gameplay itself, as opposed to orchestral music, which you hear, I think, definitely in Bethesda games and RPGs, which is like, you know, it's very swelling, expansive, and just not necessarily locked to what the player is doing at any given point. It's in the background. It's there to evoke, and it's there to be a mood and world building, but not necessarily to kind of guide your actions as the player.
Yeah, and Bethesda specifically, it seems to be wholly detached from anything the player does. It's like, you know, it picks a random number between 1 and 5, and it waits that many minutes, and then it plays the random song on the playlist.
Yep.
And if you get in a fight, then it plays the one fight song on the 4 CD album. Right? So that always bugs me about JRPGs.
Sure.
You spend, alright, so let's say it takes you 60 hours to beat a JRPG. You spend 30 hours listening to the one fight song.
Yep.
And then 30 hours listening to the rest of the soundtrack. Why didn't they just make like 5 fight songs, right?
You'll hear the battle and decisive battle, and that's it.
Right, exactly. Oh yeah, you gotta stay high above the...
And so I feel like Star Fox is a little... I mean, we talked about how Kondo was not the sole composer for Star Fox 64, but it feels like less the game is giving you information about the gameplay. It feels like it's meant to keep you excited and keep it, you know, the driving forward and more mood and evocative based, rather than this is very bouncy music, I must jump now kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the tunes in this game are meant to evoke not desperation, but a sense of urgency.
Yes.
Like, you know, hey, stuff is not great, stay alert.
Yes.
You know, it's not the end of the world yet, but, you know.
You're in trouble!
Yeah, keep an eye open.
Like, oh no,
anything could happen. Yeah, anything could happen, which is kind of what's great about Star Fox, because actually anything can happen. You know, like you fighting the space worms, and you just like beat the space worms, and then all these asteroids, and you're like, come on, man!
And And if the fight song is as bad as the one in Chrono Cross, oh.
Right, and that's the risk you run. Like, even with a good fight song, you're gonna get tired after hearing it for 30 hours.
Sure.
You know, and a bad fight song, you're gonna hate immediately.
I'm gonna have to back off.
I really want you to do the tank level with the train,
Oh, man.
but I don't think you. I think you have to beat this.
I beat this
Yeah, I think you have to beat this. It's a good way to do it.
sucks. So I shot Falcon entirely too many times.
Yeah.
Totally by accident.
Yeah,
by the way.
there's an acceptable number of times you can shoot Falco, and then it's just excessive.
Then you're just being mean.
Yeah.
Woo. You know, what's interesting, and just watching this now, is the score is not specifically trying to evoke a lava planet. It's, you know,
No, in fact, this song is shared with a couple other levels. I think they had to do that either for lack of memory or lack of time.
gotcha.
My guess is going to be lack of time because they had 4 composers on this.
Probably. But that always interests me is when there's like some music is meant to evoke a terrain or, you know, a sense of place, and others it's not. Like here, like, no, we're gonna keep the same sort of energetic, heroic, pew 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 kind of. Oh no!
Yeah, I think just because they needed to share this between different levels, they
Yeah.
had to do something like that. In fact, this song is the same song in the tank level I was talking to Joe about just now. But it's very different in that level. You know, you're in a land-based tank. You're chasing a train, which is really cool. Yeah, it's really cool. And like the train, he can't leave the tracks, so he's trying to distract you.
Oh,
Right,
okay,
so
okay.
he's got a gun. He like knocks boulders off the mountain to try to stop you, and there's like enemy fighters coming at you. So it's really cool how like you have to deal with distractions as quick as you can, and then get back to like nailing the train with your laser.
Neat.
Yeah. So that same song we hear here takes on a wholly different meaning. You know, it's like
Yeah.
there it's almost like, hey, stay focused on the train.
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah, the same song can give you a totally different set of information.
Right, and that's what's cool when it's done right,
Uh-huh.
and simultaneously hard about that. you
Right.
know. I need you to make a song that works in many situations.
Yes.
And, you know, from my own experience, they tell you that about 7 days before the game ships.
No.
Yep, it's like, hey, we're out of time. We need you to take the songs you have and put them in the levels where there isn't any music. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
And you're like, it won't work in those levels. And they're like, it'll be fine, don't worry.
So I wanted to ask you, just going back to the Aquas arrangement, how, as an arranger, do you work around the compression loop aspect of, like, maybe the piece itself is like 1 minute and 30 seconds, and
Right.
we're expanding it to be 4 or 5 minutes? Because then we talk a lot about putting a piece that is, you know, all electronic, maybe like a couple different voices into 80 musicians, but what about the compression itself?
What about the
looping.
the time axis?
Yeah.
Back off.
Complexity axis, time axis. Yeah. So that is a good question. A lot of what I and probably many others do is I will reprise. I will
Sure.
do it one way the first time, and then I'll do it a very different way the second time. And with the aim of adding context, like,
Yes.
hey, you just heard this thing, but I bet you didn't think of this. So what I did with Aquas specifically, we talked about a little earlier. I wanted to evoke that like emptiness, so I did a first very sparse, run of it, and then I wanted to really build on that notion of the expired civilization that the game never really built on. So then I added a ton of complexity to it. So now you've got your baseline like kinda close to what the game had, and then you've got like all my crazy interpretations on it. And so it's even though it's the same melody over and over again, the context is so different that it's it doesn't get boring after the first listen anyway. Maybe if you listen to it all day, you'd get bored of it. But So
not necessarily like what we had in Undertale with an entire suite, but just within the piece itself, it's still the same bass, but maybe adding different musicians or adding maybe like a counter melody, something like that.
Right, and these are techniques that orchestrators and composers have been using even before they had to figure out how to turn Star Fox into orchestra music.
Sure.
It was kind of the thing where you'd have a theme and then you'd do variations on the theme.
Yes.
Or if you had a symphony, maybe you'd have 3 themes or however many. And you would do variations on them throughout the piece. And the whole point was to show the relationship between these themes and to show them in new ways to get people to think about them differently. So, what you can do it, Joe? You got this?
Problem is I have to keep waiting for him to send me things to shoot
Right.
to get my shield back.
So what we did, specifically what we did with the Undertale Symphony, we used a lot of tricks there, or I should say Jamin used a lot of tricks there. He didn't just change instrumentation, he changed background chord structure, he changed rhythm.
Right.
He would put 2 or more themes together, he would write counter melodies, his own unique counter melodies that he created to kind of accompany these themes. And sometimes the Toby Fox's themes would go in the background and it would be Jamin's theme in the front for a little bit, just to show contrast.
Yeah.
And for a work of that length, you really do need variety like that of all kinds, change the mode of the melody, change the rhythm of the melody, background chords, instrumentation. And also I think a big thing of that is timing, like you can't harp on one melody for too long. Because it, is fatiguing mentally.
Yes.
But sometimes when you bring it back, even if you haven't changed it necessarily that much, it's meaningful because there's sort of like a temporal, you have a temporal awareness of the piece. Like, oh yes, the fact that I haven't heard this in a while adds additional context.
Sure.
So.
That's pretty cool. Oh, ouch. Oh no. Fox! Fox! Oh no.
You can do it, man! Oh, look at that!
Skin your teeth, skin your teeth!
Everything's fine.
Oh man, so...
Reno asks if I'm a game music designer. I have done so in the past. Currently, I am a sound engineer with Sparky Pants, but our contract composer is Grant Kirkhope.
Grant.
Grant Kirkhope. Supposedly he doesn't like that. So I work with Grant, and we kind of set the musical goals for the piece, for the game, and he does most of the heavy lifting there. I really just cheer him on.
Awesome. Oh, we're so much closer than we were before.
Nice.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you did.
Nice flying.
It almost looks like you won't die from heat. Like you'll get down to 1, but you
Okay.
won't die from heat. Yeah. Nice.
Oh, you got this, you got this.
Yeah, you got this now.
It's this music for Civilization Beyond Earth that is amazing by Grant Kirkhope.
Yes, he did. It was him and Jeff Knorr and Michael Curran and maybe one other, Griffin Cohen, who's a staff composer at Firaxis.
It's the incomparable Banjo-Kazooie. And you should check out our video section on our channel tab. We talked about Freeze Easy Peak a couple weeks back and had a lot of fun doing that.
That was the wood ensemble, right?
Yeah,
Wood ensemble.
the Woodwind Quintet. Oh man, look at this Star Fox action.
Yes, Grant took over Donkey Kong starting with 64. And I think ending whenever GameCube came out. Grant also did GoldenEye 64, the iconic.
And Perfect Dark.
And Perfect Dark. And Ukulele is his newest, if you guys haven't checked that out.
It's a joy. Whoa! If you ever need boss music on a fly, just throw in or Fortuna and call it a day.
So true.
Or like Ride the Valkyries, maybe.
Yeah.
So, Chris, do you think that game music needs to function in service of the game? Like, does it have, like Koji Kondo believes that, it must have its own internal rhythm. It must, be tied to the gameplay just very intricately. Or do you think that game music, I mean, not that it can or can't be both evocative or mood building, but is there a specific philosophy about composing that one way or another?
I don't think so. I mean, each composer will have his or her own philosophy, but I don't think there is, and I kind of like that. Because you'll get just as many philosophies as you get composers,
Sure.
which means that there's even more variety in game music. So Skyrim doesn't follow the Koji Kondo school of
Sure.
composition, right? And it's not all Jeremy Soule. From what I understand, he actually did not do most of the Skyrim music. They just pegged him for the title theme and a couple tracks. But
He did some of the more melodic ones, less of the kind of ambient stuff that is in the background.
So there's something really nice about wandering around Skyrim and hearing these ambient tracks, especially at night when it's thematic and like you have the northern lights or whatever atmospheric interference, magnetospheric interference there are on that planet, and it's kind of nice to not have location-based music. It puts it in a different frame, and I think that's kind of what Bethesda wants. Like, we have made this big thing for you.
Sure.
There's not one right way to do it.
This is the train level.
Hey, the forever
Yes, it
train.
is. You did
All
it.
right.
All right. This is the one I was talking about.
Sounds fun.
Yes, it is super fun. And notice that we're not in a plane right now. We're in a tank that can hover. It's not a plane. It's a tank that can hover.
I spot the train.
So, and in fact, the new Zelda actually borrows from this mentality.
Yes.
Now, the new Zelda is not Koji Kondo, as I understand it.
Right.
But it has a very Skyrim-esque gameplay, open world where you can explore. And the soundtrack is barely there, but you just have
Very
these.
sparse.
Yeah, you just have these like little accents. Honestly, like the most sound you hear comes from the natural sound effects of the world. The wind and the crickets and whatever.
Yeah.
And you have these little piano accents over the whole thing. It's very reminiscent of Skyrim, and it really works for that game. Because so much of the game is about looking and seeing and figuring out how can I get up to this mountain.
Right.
Same with Skyrim. So it's a very, it's almost contemplative, So if there was only ever Koji Kondo's way of doing it, we'd miss out on that experience.
Sure.
Trying to think of something like some other composer's approach that's just totally off the wall that still works. I could go on and on and on about Mirror's Edge, but I like that mainly for the instrumentation and less for the approach. That's a game that, especially the sequel, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, that's a game that I feel uses very effective soundtrack, but it's not in a standard game soundtrack way.
If we're talking about totally off the wall, have you played Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time?
No, but
Oh my
that sounds funny.
It's most of its soundtrack is like dance music because it's just a completely bonkers. The idea is you are in space trying to rescue some bunnies, and it's a two-player game, and one person has to be either, you have a choice of steering your ship, the guns, the shield, like all aspects of this have to be controlled by two people, so it takes a lot of communication.
Oh, that's funny.
And, but the soundtrack itself is just like nothing like what you would expect for that kind of space adventure game. So it's just like, okay, I did not necessarily follow the Koji Kondo school. Like, I'm not composing to make it like give you a piece of music that is directed by its gameplay. I'm not trying to evoke a bunny sound space thing. I'm just trying to make this like this kind of
Right,
thing,
right.
so. just sort of like throwing both of those out the window, really, and like I just wanted to make some cool music.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
like, that's totally legit.
The composer for Katamari, the main composer, because there were like 8 composers, he said that he sat down with his team and specifically tried to make music that did not fit the concept art, expecting management to reject it, and they didn't. So then he's like, okay, we're going forward with it.
You got this, you got this. Woo! So yeah, there's one approach.
Yep.
Is just do whatever you want.
So I will reference one more game, and that's Fez. So Fez is a puzzle game. It's sort of a spatial puzzle game. One of them's on the left, across the track. I think you missed it. Yep. In fact, another one's over there. But there's no combat in it at all. So it's like a Mario-esque platformer, but there's no combat in it. And the theme of the game is all about like questioning reality. Like the longer you play the game, the more you wonder, what the crap is even going on. And the music from the game is often brooding. Like it's very down most of the time, contemplative. Sometimes it's, there is no like official hoity-toity definition of music, but sometimes it's not even music in the way that many people would define it. It's just like a couple chords that he pitch bends across each other until they change places, but it makes you go, what is this? And that's the whole point of the game, right? And it's I can't tell if it's location based or not. It does seem to change when you go to different locations, but each song appears in multiple places so that it's not really bound to a single location. We have Continuum from Fez. Oh yes, we do have Continuum from Fez in the SES.
Coming up.
Continuum does not really hold to the description I just gave, because mainly it is a Chopin etude that he stuck in the soundtrack. But even then, that was it's not. It was written for piano by Chopin, but in the game, it's like chiptunes, and it gets more and more bit crushed as you listen to it. And at the same time, I don't want to say too much. At the same time, weird stuff is happening to the world around you, and again, it makes you go, what does this mean?
That's true, yeah. And then maybe that's its own category itself. Ambient music that is not necessarily meant to just be in the background, but to give a theme, like contribute to the overall, not necessarily mood, but like what is the game trying to accomplish in and of itself.
And then, of course, there's Sync, which is a fantastic song from that game. It's like the one exception to the rule. There's just like this really peppy, like chiptunes beat. Like it's just in one area of the game.
I guess like Fallout is kind of like that as well, with not the soundtrack proper, but the Galaxy radio that is using very old tunes to sort of juxtapose this like extremely horrific landscape that you're walking around. It's just like very peppy.
So it's almost
like 40s jazz music. So.
It's almost like that's actually kind of the same thing as Fez. It's creating this mood, like this almost like insanest black humor mood of like.
Very close, very close.
Do you get another chance at the switches? You do. Because that's kind of like the earmark of Fallout, is like this 50s aesthetic with right next to this like horrible atrocity, right? This enormous wasteland. So it's sort of like reinforcing the mood even without any like on-screen confirmation or
it's just there as you're walking, and it's still functional. Nope. Crunch.
Fallout also, especially the earlier Fallouts before Bethesda, also had some great atmospheric music. It was very down, like very like droning kind of, and like the drones would pitch bend, so you'd have these really unusual, like, you know, it's almost like when they take Voyager transmissions and turn it into music, like, it's almost like that. But it really painted a great picture of this, like, very alien landscape, which is somehow still Earth, you know?
Right. Come on, you can do it.
I think you missed more than one.
That's okay. There.
On the gas.
Step on the gas.
Step on the gas.
Step on the
Step
gas.
on the gas.
So wait, you only use driving this hover tank?
Yep.
Are they in the tank with you?
No, they're in the sky, like, keeping the fighters off of you.
Oh.
Yeah.
I am but one man in a hover tank. One fox, sorry.
Yes, so bit crushed is a term of the art. Actually, in common usage, it does not mean bit crushing at all. So bit crushing, you know, when you have a digital sound, it creates an oscillation in the air, which is represented by a numerical value, right? So like
Wait,
a wave, as it were. But the computer stores it as volume over time. So, you know, it slowly increases in volume over time and then decreases and increases and decreases. And the number of bits in the sound is how many steps of volume increase and decrease you can have. What resolution does it understand? So CD quality is 16 bits.
Right.
That's 65,000, right? Yeah, that's 65,000 volume steps. That provides a pretty accurate, you know, picture of whatever sound you've captured. Bit crushing is specifically reducing the number of steps and rounding the volume numbers to fit within the, you know, the reduced number of steps that you have. So bit crushing, you lower and lower the accuracy of it until you get down to, you know, like 4-bit, where there's only 16 steps of volume, and it starts to have a very distorted sound. It starts to have very
So you create something totally new at that point.
yeah, I mean, it's so the human ear is remarkably good at picking at overcoming distortion. So people can almost certainly recognize it as its source
Sure.
material, but it sounds just, you know, all blasted to heck, right?
That's
It
so
has a very
cool.
edgy, distorted sound to it. But that is not what most people mean when they say bit crushing. They actually mean downsampling when they say bit crushing, and that is not reducing the number of volume steps, but rather the number of times you tell it to change volume per second. So probably to the minimum amount of, you know, steps you can have to reproduce human speech well would be like maybe 4,000 a second, maybe 8,000 a second. And we talk about that in hertz, but there are different ways to round those numbers, you know, to shuffle them to the left and the right as you're decreasing the number of samples per second, and that creates that kind of, that really like bit, like chiptunesy, hollow kind of sound.
Gotcha. So when a composer wants to do that on purpose, that's when they would start down.
Yeah, I mean there are plugins and stuff for downsampling now. It's become a trope in modern music. It's like, yeah.
Oh, here we go. See how far we get this time.
We need Z-split.
This one.
Slippy, get back here.
Slipper! Slipper, get back here!
Slippy!
Slipper!
Be on your tail.
I like to imagine that they just like pulled in somebody who was walking around like, you do a funny voice, come here, come on the stage.
So they did do that in the past, like
Yeah.
the very famous opening line for Super Metroid is, "The last Metroid is in captivity."
Right.
That was like an intern at Nintendo of America.
Chris Madsen has done like nearly half of the Blizzard voices.
Is he like a staff Is he on staff?
Well, he wound up as when he finally retired. He was like basically head of Blizzard. Chris Metzen?
I don't know him.
Oh yeah. He's
Whoop. Culture of the series, I think we're going to,
No, you missed
it's a bit outside the scope. We're mostly going to be talking about game music today, and
Enemy on your tail. Use the brake.
That is an interesting thing that I'm curious to talk about, but I will stay on topic.
it's fine. No, I think,
Take this. Get the one.
oh, come on.
Something's wrong with the G diffuser. Use the boot to take.
I just like funny voices.
yeah, for sure. Did you know that John Delancey's in StarCraft Legacy of the Void?
really.
Yeah.
Do a barrel roll.
Well, you did your best.
Yep. Or not, because I've actually seen you do better.
I must have shot a couple of times.
Sick burn, man.
It's like the speedrunner mentality. You did your best. No, I didn't.
No.
I have video of my best.
Definitely not.
yeah.
Somersault.
Bye.
Enemy robot. Dead ahead.
So, cool thing that Koji Kondo said, I was sort of digging up various interviews that he's done over the years. And he says game music is precisely something that comes from composers working closely together with the rest of the staff. It's a very important point.
I'm going to crush.
And that is, I don't know if that's something that's really possible in this day and age, just with so many hundreds of people all having involvement with like a AAA title. You know, you have your, not just one guy necessarily doing the sound and the music like Kondo did himself with the original Super Mario Brothers. You know, a lot of the design was in his direct control, and a lot of his just creation was very close-knit because it was just a smaller creation at the time. But now, like, can you imagine a composer working, you know, with all of the code monkeys and all his many people who have an involvement with the game? I kind of wonder if that's definition of game music really exists anymore. What do you think?
I think it does. So, I used to work for a small app developer, and I was pretty handy with coding myself because I'd done a lot of coding. So they just let me implement my own stuff, which is not normal. You know, normally you're like, all right, I made this sound. Hey, developer, please, can I steal 8 minutes of your time? Please put it in the game for me.
Sure.
And then like, oh, it's the wrong volume. Can you change it? And they're like, I'll get back to you in 6 weeks.
Right.
It's not quite that bad. But so when I got to do my own stuff, I got to do a bunch of creative things, little things, right? So like, we were doing it's an app called World of Sense. I don't even think it's in the App Store anymore, but it was for kids. It was like SimCity for kids, and you'd build a playground, right? So like, you could put whatever kind of like playground towers you want. There was like a castle, and there was a spaceship, like a rocket ship. There were swings, and one of the towers you could put was a clock tower. And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool that if you owned at least one clock tower, it would pull the device time and chime the hour? Like, isn't that just like a thematic little cool thing, right? So like, if I weren't in charge of my own implementation, I would have to go get one of the developers and maybe two of the developers who know how to pull device time, and implement something like that. But that's like the kind of little thing, like the little charm that actually means a lot to people.
Definitely, yeah.
Right? So because I was just able to do it all myself, and it was great. But now on a bigger team that I work on, I would have to
Comes a big one.
I would have to grab a developer and ask for that assistance.
Right.
And unfortunately, I work with a lot of people. I used to work with the old app developer, and they think all that kind of stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
So they're like, "Oh, dude, it would be awesome if we did this and this, right?" And like, so we can kind of like build off each other. And you know, the producers involved in voiceover production. Sometimes you have a separate writer for VO, so that's like 3 people involved in just dialogue right there. And then, so like, the actual content of the dialogue is just as important as the way it sounds, right? Like, what someone says is really going to contribute to the way the game is, and plus also how you read it. So like, if you write something as a joke, and the producer doesn't catch it, and they do a straight read in VO, you know, you're not going to pay another $5,000 to get that actor back in the studio. Like, you've now got a joke that isn't funny.
Sure.
Right, so like, that is absolutely possible if you've got a composer or a sound engineer who thinks this stuff is really cool, goes and talks to the producer thinks it's cool, everyone's communicating. That's absolutely possible. That falls more and more by the wayside as crunch time approaches, and it's like, all right, I like it, but we have to finish this game in 7 days.
Sure.
You know? So, you know, as long as there's lead time, you can get some of these really creative things in there. Voiceover, I think, is super important. Like, characterization is so important.
Right.
And it all comes from having the voice actor understand the character, put their own spin on the character, and be charming. You know, like, Blizzard does a really, really great job of straddling this line between serious and funny. Like, there's funny stuff in their universe, and there's serious stuff in their universe, but they're not mutually exclusive.
Sure.
Like, if you try to put a Blizzard hero in Lord of the Rings, it would not work, because Lord of the Rings takes itself too seriously. But if you try to put Adventure Time in, if you try to put a Blizzard hero in Adventure Time, that also wouldn't work, because it's not funny enough, right?
I would play that.
So yeah, probably from the producer and the writer's side, they're like, we have 500,000 lines of dialogue to get through. Let's just effing get through it.
Sure.
You need that sound designer to say, hey, it needs to be funny, but it needs to be charming. You know, it needs to be read this way and that. So.
Very cool.
So I think it is possible as long as you have staff willing to make that happen.
Gotcha.
I think different game developers have different attitudes towards that.
Different attitudes
Towards whether
people coming up and saying, I have an idea, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. Or, you know, and how receptive they are. Because, like, bottom line, I need a dev to do some of that work for me, right? So if that dev is always just like, I don't see how that adds to the game.
Right.
Which is kind of weird, because it's like, you're not the art lead, and that's an artistic decision.
Sure.
But at the same time, you know, it's like on your head to get this game done. So, you know, I totally get that you're busy. But yeah, so that'll happen sometimes. The dev will say, I don't see how this contributes to the game. And different game developers will put different value on a developer, like on a programmer. So at some places, they treat the lead developer like the project manager, and that person also has final artistic authority.
Got it.
Which is great if that person is an artistic person. And it's not so great if that person has a really, like, left brain view of art, because then art becomes, you know, if it's not practical, it's not going in my game, and then you lose all that charm.
Got it.
You know, like, the art becomes very literal instead of these wonderful, like, Nintendo-isms we have where, like, you know, things happen because it's funny and it makes you wonder why, and it has absolutely no practical value.
Do you think that's more expected just in games as a whole, kind of like whimsy?
I think that's part of Nintendo's brand. And other games, to varying degrees, have made that part of their brand. Blizzard is less whimsy and more snark. But that's the Blizzard brand, right? Like, guaranteed somebody's going to be a smartass and make smartass comments in a Blizzard game, right? And then, like, you're going to have these kind of, like, funny characterizations or caricatures. You know, so, like, you've got your Jim Raynor, like, the gruff, like, gruff smartass, and then you've got, like, Brightwing, which is, like, he looks like a cartoon character, and he's just, like, or I think they retconned it and make it a girl now, but she looks like a cartoon character, and she sounds like a cartoon character, and she's like a bloodthirsty monster. It'll only hurt until you die. Right? Like, they have this kind of, like, it's more of a PG-13 kind of snark. Nintendo is G, right? But, like, you know, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
people love that, even adults.
Absolutely. And do you hear that kind of aesthetic in the music of Star Fox? Because we talked about how it's very heroic, but it's not necessarily because the scope of the game is different. It's so intensely
Yeah.
you know, it's not, like we said, it's not as a exploration based as Mario and Zelda.
So I think more in the first one, like they had that Thunderbirds aesthetic they were going for.
Sure.
And the music is just it's really upbeat and fun. Like it really
Yes.
it makes you want to be active and do stuff. This one is a little more narrative. Here is a musical summary of what you're seeing. You know, like it would fit a movie really well.
That's true.
It's. I think it's hummable, but only because I've heard it 10,000 times. Probably your layperson would not find this as hummable.
Hummable.
Yeah. It's kind of these weird modulations and these weird, not terribly melodic melodies.
And it's meant to keep you on edge.
It is.
You know, meant to feel unresolved, as if something else was still coming, which is true. There are more spaceships coming.
Always. That's the Star Fox mantra.
There's always more spaceships
More stuff is coming, yeah.
Bum, ba-dum.
A to charge your laser.
You got it, Slippy.
You can also lock onto enemies this way.
Ooh, black hole! Nope.
Come on.
Just shoot it, Hawk.
Oh, that's what we're supposed to do. Oh, okay.
So, it's funny, the vastly different value that different developers put on it. But then you got to think about what they got famous for in the first place, right?
Yeah.
We've never put emphasis on music before. Why would we start it now?
Do you find that in your own experience, just working on those kinds of projects? Does music come as an afterthought, would you say? Or
It can. I mean, so it's almost always budgeted as part of a big project, right? Okay, everyone agrees we need music.
Sure.
What role it plays and how it sounds is more up to whomever is given creative authority on the project. So in some places it actually is the lead developer becomes art lead as well and makes musical decisions.
Got it.
Some places that is farmed off to art lead. Some places have staff composers or staff audio people, and it's usually farmed off to them. The difference, differs place to place. And I guess those attitudes could probably change if studio leadership ever changes too.
Right.
But
or maybe if, say, if you are a company that's known for its music, then you probably would put.
Right. So Bethesda is a good example. Bethesda actually is known for its music. Bethesda is known for its theme songs.
Absolutely.
And nothing else.
Oh, yes. We talked about this in the Skyrim stream. There's very little that's distinguishing about its soundtrack place to place beyond the main title theme. So maybe they did take a little of the Koji Kondo school of game composition where the main title theme is the thing that you remember the most.
Right.
So they put, the most catchy part of it. If music is an afterthought, does that mean you generally get more freedom to do what you want?
So, no. No. Unfortunately, when it is an afterthought, that usually means they want that leadership wants to pigeonhole it into a certain sound. So, I've never actually seen this, but I've kind of heard horror stories where they're like, just make it sound like The Matrix. And this is something that no composer wants to hear, because it's like, why don't you just license the Matrix soundtrack instead of paying me? So usually when it's an afterthought, it's like, we'll just make The Matrix and it will be fine.
It's interesting you say make it like XYZ, because I think that's something that film music runs into quite a bit as well, because what will happen is film is in development, and then they will put temp music over the scene. So it'll be the most like a rough cut of the piece of the film, except for the music that has not been written yet. But that temp music influences the director's decision on what is supposed to feel or sound like. So what you end up with is a finished score that sounded a lot like the music they put temporarily over it as they were still putting the film together. And does that happen, you think, in games too?
Famously, Stanley Kubrick put some Wagner in 2001 as temp music. And there's Blue Danube. I don't know if that's Wagner as well, but he put some classical music in there. And he had his composer do like a 2.5 hour score, start to finish. Like every second of that movie had music on it, and it took him so long. And Stanley Kubrick got so used to the temp track that he kept the temp track and didn't tell the composer.
Oh, that part I didn't hear.
The composer found out at the debut of the film and has not spoken to Stanley Kubrick since.
Yowza.
Yep. They have actually put on concerts of what the score would have been, like the 2001 actual score. I've never heard it, but...
That's nuts.
Yep. So I wanted to relay that anecdote, but then I wanted to actually answer your question, but then I forgot the question, so what's the question?
Oh, just that, does that kind of thing happen in games that you've seen, as far as there's maybe a temporary track or something, just the artistically just had a really specific idea of the kind of music he wanted, and so as a result, the finished score ended up as that. Kind of similar as the temporary thing versus the finished product.
That varies on studio as well. There are a lot of studios where the creative decision maker says, "Hey, composer, I'm gonna kind of let you run with this. Like whatever you think is best, you know better than me." And then there are some where it's like, "I want it to sound like Inception." And so, a lot of these composers are, they're contract composers, so this is a job. You have to do the job to the spec. So you might be like, okay, I did a couple. Here's one that sounds, a lot like Inception, but then here's one I think might work better because, this is my opinion is what I do.
Yeah.
And the art lead will be like Inception. Right? And then so, right? Like just real quick. Nope, Inception. Yep. So like, sometimes, yes, you wind up just being like completely brick-walled into copying the Inception score. It just all depends on who you're working with.
Right.
And it's like, at the end of the day, it is money. Maybe not your best work, but, pays the bills.
Definitely, yeah.
So.
Do you think that composers go for a sense of, I want to create something that has never been heard before in this strange world, in this like this imaginary place? There's in Chrono Trigger we talked about that a fair amount.
Yeah, the Corridors of Time theme.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, we want our music to sound like nothing else. This is something that we don't want people to necessarily have a frame of reference for, but now we kind of do, like with game music, because that has been written and that foundation has been built. It's like we ask game composers, can you make it sound like X, Y, Z, versus we want to make something that necessarily is not like everything else, that is different, that is, that sets a new bar or sets a new time and place. Or do you think that there's more of a, we want this to sound like other things that have existed before?
So the way I understood Jamin's comment was that he thought Corridors of Time sounded like nothing else in the game, within the body of work of the game. And that was important because it was a complete total gear change.
Right.
The Kingdom of, I forget what it's called, Vane or something. I think it's Kingdom of Vane. They wanted it to have its own acoustic thumbprint, right? I don't actually think it's possible to write music that sounds like nothing else anymore. We have done too much insane crap with music. Like, people will like record industrial equipment and call it music. There's what's it called? It's like ambient. There's a whole ambient genre where it's like, in fact, there's a band I listen to, a group I listen to called Sleep Research Facility that does ambient music, and they released an album called Nostromo, and the whole, it's like inspired by background effects in the original Alien movie.
Whoa.
Right? So it's just supposed to sound like the ambient noises on the ship in that movie. I don't think there is anything we can do in this day and age that does not sound like something.
That's totally fair.
What's far more important? The helicopter concerto with it's like 4 violins and 4 helicopters. Oh,
that's amazing.
Yeah, but it's And they're like far away from each other.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. And then there's like 4 minutes 33 seconds, which literally sounds like nothing. And,
That's true. That the most avant-garde of avant-garde pieces.
but probably isn't even. I don't know. Silence is a lot like, I don't know. You get like Threnody for Victims of Hiroshima, which was like not even supposed to be about
kind of
Hiroshima.
atypical.
Yeah.
Well, same guy that did 5 minutes 30 seconds is also playing. Has some church bell somewhere in the Midwest playing a song that will end in like 2027.
Yeah. It's like a 10-year long or like 40-year long composition. Yeah.
Threnody is intense.
Yeah, and it is. And somebody told me once that Threnody was not supposed to be about Hiroshima. It just had some like random title, like, you know, Song for Strings, and then no one liked it, so he made it about Hiroshima, and then it got more popular.
And John Cage, that was the composer. There we go.
I think you're right. What's far more important is to pick something that works. And in most cases, but not all, pick something that makes the game sound like no other game, sound like itself. So I brought up Mirror's Edge a while ago. Mirror's Edge sounds and looks like Mirror's Edge.
Sure.
And that really contributes to, I think it helps its staying power. I think it helps its appeal because it doesn't look like anything else. It doesn't sound like anything else. But also it makes it more culturally relevant. Like it's really adding to the culture. It's not just rehashing Inception. And that's what's more important, I think, than making it sound like nothing we've ever heard. Making it sound like a unique experience. So Breath of the Wild we talked about.
Yeah.
There are thousands of mood music CDs that have someone noodling on a piano for hours and hours, right? Like that's some of the easiest music to produce. You just
Be on the lookout for our new CD, Chris noodling on a piano.
right, exactly. You like one take. You can make 5 of them in a day, right? But I've never seen a game do it.
Sure.
Because it didn't work until now. And now it accentuates the natural soundscape of that world. It's incredibly effective while hardly being there at all. And it's completely iconic now. Like the Barely There soundtrack of Breath of the Wild. It's completely iconic. It's famous for not existing.
Madonna and Justin Timberlake also made 4 minutes, but it's not similar to John Cage. Oh yeah, they're a huge hat tip to 8-Bit Music Theory, who's done not just Breath of the Wild video, but also a lot of Zelda stuff.
I remember Jamin talking about him before.
Yeah, it's, which we'll be talking about next week for our Legend of Zelda broadcast. Looking forward to that.
Oh, you're covering Breath of the Wild next week?
We're not doing Breath of the Wild, we're doing Ocarina of Time.
Ah, okay.
Data analysis complete. Here it comes.
So Jamin did talk about that a little bit on the Chrono Trigger stream, how Chrono Trigger also has its own identity, and it comes from a lot of the, I don't want to say non-standard, but not poppy chord progressions that he chose. A lot of suspensions and a lot of the chord progressions which just aren't 1, 4, 5.
Yes.
And I think also, in huge part, Chrono Trigger is famous for the sound set that it used, the sound samples that it used. There is a song in Undertale that literally rips off Chrono Trigger sound samples and just puts different melodies on them. And I hadn't heard it in a while, and I was like, whoa, I don't remember this song off the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. But the fact that I knew what it was from, and I couldn't see my media player, so I didn't know what it was, I couldn't read it, but the fact that I could identify it by acoustical signature.
Sure. Which Undertale song was that?
I don't remember. Jamin probably knows. Nope, he's the one who asked. I'll find it. I'll find it. I put a playlist of all the game music I own while I was playing a game with a friend, and so stuff was popping up all the time, and I was like, whoa, what is this? I haven't listened to this in years. I kept like ducking out of the game to look, and then he's like, well, I really need help right now. I'm like, oh, right, yeah, sorry. I'll find it for you, don't worry.
Get him, get him, get him!
Mark, are you okay?
No!
That's bad idea. What was that?
How rude, Slippy.
I can probably play it for you.
I know that some stuff from Earthbound was.
Does that sound familiar? Whatever the song that is.
I can't take it anymore.
Go, Joe! Go, Joe! Get those birds. Those lava birds.
I guess. I don't actually know. I only know about half of them by name.
Oh, do you want to try? See if you can remember that bit again.
Yeah. Sorry. That's all I remember.
Name that tune.
Yep. I think the okay.
Come on, you can do it.
I think this part comes in later.
Oh, you're so ugly.
Data analysis complete. Here it comes.
Ooh. Come on, you got this. You got this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mark, are you okay?
Reunited. Okay, that is the mystery track. Oh no, no! Come on, you got this! Go, go, go! That particular snippet now makes me smile even before I realize what I'm smiling at. And for me, I just immediately start going, mushroom, mushroom, mushroom.
Yeah, you got this, Joe.
Oh, nice!
Nice.
Look at that!
All the hell.
Yeah. It doesn't let you back up, does it?
It only lets you slow down,
Yeah.
but not very much.
Nope.
I don't even think it really slows you down. It just moves your R-Wing closer to the screen. So you're like kind of slowing down.
Oh, it does. You can brake. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
So like the camera stays at the same speed.
Right,
It's just
right.
your thing gets closer for a minute.
Like you do. Pull the paper. Ugh.
You're all right.
So I think this game in particular is pretty tied to its sound effects.
Yeah.
Still, like even
Oh, yeah.
though it is the N64 era, I know, which way expanded what was possible. And the like it's overwhelmingly you can hear the shooting sound, the barfing rock sound,
Yeah.
the lava sound. And I think that. Do you think that's a hallmark of Nintendo in particular? Is that the sound effects get as much interconnection with music as anything else?
I think that iconic sound effects are typically a hallmark of Nintendo games.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of their releases have purposely shown to deviate from that. Because the more iconic your sound effects are, also the campier they can be in the
Right.
wrong context.
That's very true.
Further, the more musical they are, the more campy they can be in a
Yes.
certain context. So a game like Skyrim needs literal sound effects, because if it's very literal,
You did it.
less cartoony interpretation. Graphics are very literal. Looks like a big fantasy movie. Looks like Lord of the Rings. You did it. So if the sound effects were kind of sing-song, it would not fit. This game, I think, has some great iconic sound effects. Probably the most of which are the like "you're gonna die" sound. Like that will just any Star Fox player, you just play that sound, you'll just stress them out, right?
Yeah.
And Super Nintendo had a similar. Well, it had a "you're gonna die" sound. It sounds a little different, but same thing. You know, play it for them, stresses them out immediately.
Definitely.
Whether they're interconnected with the music, I think that depends actually on the franchise. Mario, yes,
sure.
Absolutely. It always has been. That's been part of its appeal. Even when they went with a more orchestral sound for Galaxy, the sound of he orchestrated the whole soundtrack, and then he created silent MIDI chords underneath that do not play, but at any given point, the game knows what chord the background music is in, and when you strike an interactable object like a button, it will play a note in that chord. So every tone you hear is in the chord of the background music.
Right.
At all times. Zelda, yes, actually. That one's probably the most of all relies on musical riffs as sound effects, you know, and like that, right?
Got a thing.
So that we have seen that to change based on the aesthetic of the soundtrack. So in Breath of the Wild, you know, it's barely there. It's up here, right? If you weren't thinking about it, you wouldn't realize what you were hearing. Right.
I think Star Fox doesn't. I think you're right. Beyond that, "you're gonna die" sound, like we're not getting we're getting the laser sounds. But it's not like we get a special sound effect when we do a barrel roll or when you hit the brake or something like that.
Yeah, I mean they're exciting sounds. They're like arcade sounds.
Right.
Pew, 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 pew.
But it's very it very much becomes white noise. At least for me.
Absolutely. I mean, because you always be shooting, right? In Star Fox, always be shooting.
Yes.
So like. Yeah. That's how you'll play for a while and your thumb starts hurting. So yes, it becomes this kind of ocean of noise.
Yeah, well, in our last couple minutes, do you think you could? We got a question. Could you talk about how you opened up the synthesized sounds? And you mentioned the doing that for the choir with in the original iteration of Pillars of Aquas. It's kind of this not easily identifiable instrument. It's an oohing kind of sound, and that was put into voices. But how else did you expand the synthesized sounds into acoustic instruments?
Sure. So we talked a little bit about putting it in the choir, and about how I wanted to expand it to not be this thin instrumentation anymore, but to be this very big, grandiose exploration of this civilization under the water that had expired for some random reason. I took a lot of cues from sort of classical music in the same vein. I wanted to develop a romantic sounding theme or a wholesome sounding theme. I didn't exactly steal everything from Neptune, because Neptune stays more in the ethereal kind of area. It's never big and grandiose. But I borrowed ideas from other compositions that are big and grandiose, because I wanted to really explore what this civilization was, you know. I really wanted to push that like Greco-Roman aesthetic, pillars and acropolises, and you know, white marble and like really like, you know, Atlantis almost kind of a thing, you know. So there's always the like melancholy horn for Atlantis because they died, and like really using those cultural influences to inform the instrumentation decisions. And I was just hoping that the audience would pick up on all that and like kind of get what I was trying to do. So I tried to be a bit obvious about it, but sometimes I'm told I'm a lot more subtle than I think I'm being, so I don't know.
Do it. Alright, so we will see if we can get past the stage. You're very lucky. Did you like my impression?
Yes, I did. It's under the door. Shoot the door. Yeah.
Nice.
And it's on the left again. 8's on the left, 7's on the right. Yeah, he does this on purpose, right?
What a jerk.
Shoot them. Yeah, no, shoot it. Shoot it. Shoot it. Yes, you did it.
Excellent.
And you get 50 hits for free for doing this.
Wow.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there we go. That's what we want.
That's what we wanted.
No! Hit the brakes!
It's like doing this the hard way.
Nope. What if we can't? Oh, wow.
Fuck with the ants, nice.
I love it. All
I
right.
think that's a pretty good way to end the stream.
That is a good way. We did it, everybody.
We just need Fox walking away with... So you kind of get
There
that,
we
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in today. We'll be back next week with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and hope that you'll join us then. We have concerts coming up this summer on July 22nd and August 4th. Check it out at wmgso.org/events. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.